The ultimate body snatching scam, a practice of 2 centuries ago, is still being debated to this day. Its target was Charles Byrne, who, born in the north of Ireland in 1761, just kept growing after other kids his age had stopped. At the time, the assumed reason was that he had been conceived on the top of a haystack, but it's now known that he had a genetic condition called gigantism. This caused him to grow over 7.5 feet, thus becoming Ireland's tallest man at that time. He astonished night watchmen who saw him lighting his pipe from street lamps without even standing on tiptoes. By his late teens, Byrne was being invited to dinner parties as entertainment, his lofty stature Exhibit A to amazed guests. He probably realised that he could earn something of a living from displaying his incredible height, and headed south to fame and fortune in busy London. At age 21, Byrne arrived in London, where at this time people were paying money to marvel at individuals of unusual sizes and physical characteristics, a culture of gaping at those who were then called freaks and wonders. Historians note that thousands of people paid to come and see the renowned young man at choice venues in places like Piccadilly and Charing Cross. The gentle, likeable publicity magnate became known as the Irish Giant, and even inspired a hit London stage show. The price audiences paid to observe him up close was 2.06, which was about a whole day's wage for a skilled craftsman. However, with Byrne's newfound fame and affluence came a horrifying realisation. News of his extraordinary height had also caught the attention of some pioneering surgeons in London, who had a way more sinister goal in mind. Byrne's entry onto the London scene coincided with scientific developments which saw the study of human anatomy gathering pace. Amongst these groundbreaking medicos was a prominent surgeon and anatomist named John Hunter. As the most famous, sought-after and best-paid surgeon of the 18th century, his methods of learning about human anatomy were probably repugnant to many. He and his colleagues pursued their thirst for knowledge by dissecting or observing dissections of deceased individuals. In order to hone their awareness and skills, they needed to investigate dead bodies before they practiced on living patients. For that, they required a steady supply of cadavers. This demand created the gruesome industry of body snatching. During the 18th and 19th century, thieves would visit graveyards on moonless nights and dig up recently buried cadavers to deliver to medical schools. Because the only freshly deceased bodies legally available for medical dissection were those of recently executed criminals, demand far exceeded supply. John Hunter was upfront about his interests, even asking his friends and family for permission to dissect them post-mortem. He managed to persuade his own father-in-law to agree to the procedure after he died. What Hunter regarded as even more interesting than a normal body was one that would clearly be an unusual specimen. He valued anything out of the norm, especially an unusual medical condition. This led to his interest in Charles Byrne's body, and apparently Hunter had offered to pay Byrne in advance for his corpse. It was also known that several other doctors had made Byrne offers for obtaining his body after he died. The young man was horrified at the idea and, according to newspaper reports of the day, terrified of anatomists. He felt appalled at the thought of his body being dissected after his death and probably being put on display. Wanting to bypass this horrendous outcome, he conceived a plan which would be needed sooner than he would have liked. Unfortunately, about a year after his arrival in London, Byrne's life spiralled downwards, according to reports from the time that he'd developed a drinking problem. After passing out in the street one night, he awoke to find his entire life's savings of £700, which he was carrying, had been stolen. This setback, combined with his then unknown growth disorder of the now recognised acromegaly or acromegalic gigantism, saw his retreat from the public eye. His health irreparably damaged, he died on June 1st, 1783, aged 22. Prior to his death, Byrne had made his friends promise to ensure that he was buried at sea, with the plan that a weighted coffin buried at sea cannot be dug up and sold on the black market. However, while his friends did transport his lead-lined coffin to the coastal town of Margate, it was full of stones. One theory is that Hunter had arranged with Byrne's friends for his cadaver to be extracted during its journey, his body swapped for rocks, and his remains delivered to Hunter. Most theories point to Hunter bribing Byrne's undertaker £500 to substitute the stones for his body in the coffin. The Hunterian Museum claimed that Byrne's friends were privy to the plan, and it was those individuals whom Hunter paid for the body. So, despite his wishes, Byrne's body ended up in the exact place he didn't want it to be. 4 years later, Hunter had completed his dissection of it and was displaying Byrne's skeleton in his specimen collection. This is now called the Royal College of Surgeons Hunterian Museum. For over 200 years, Byrne's skeleton stayed on public exhibition for all to see, until 2017, when the museum closed down for 6 years to embark on a multi-million-dollar refurbishment. A few months before its reopening, the museum issued a statement saying that its board of trustees had decided the skeleton would stay removed from display, but retained in the collection to aid future research into gigantism. Accordingly, on reopening in January 2023, the towering skeleton had not been returned to its usual place. Since then, Byrne's only appearance at the museum is the presence of his feet in a portrait of Hunter by Sir Joshua Reynolds. Opinions have varied on the decision, some calling it a cowardly bowing to pressure, others adamant that Byrne's last wishes need to be finally respected. His bones have been of great value in teaching and scientific research, with his condition diagnosed in the early 20th century. It was discovered that his enlarged pituitary gland had been continuing to secrete growth hormone, so that the young man was still growing at the time of his death. In the early 21st century, DNA extracted from one of Charles Byrne's teeth enabled the identification of the rare gene that causes the condition. The researchers found that 4 Northern Ireland families carry this genetic mutation and share a common ancestor from about 1500 years ago. Given his scientific contribution, it's argued that there's no longer any medical value to the retention of Byrne's skeleton, particularly not in the Memorial Museum to the man who so mistreated him. It's been said that Byrne's spirit has not been at rest for almost 250 years, so that now he deserves a respectful burial at sea as he desired. The gruesome exhibits in the Hunterian Museum in London seem a perfect habitat for tormented souls, however no resident ghost has ever been reported. Unlike in its affiliate Hunterian Museum in Glasgow, established by John Hunter's brother William, also an anatomist and physician. A translucent, faceless woman in a long Victorian-era gown has been spotted in a hallway at least 4 times by visitors, and also been captured by a night security camera in the same area. The woman seemed to pause and regard the camera before melting into the wall. Paranormal investigators' EMF meters later spiked in the hallway of the sightings, and their digital box recorded a voice saying, "Still here."